Hello, everyone, and welcome in to the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. If you're watching over on YouTube, we appreciate it. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and give us your thoughts down below. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you might be finding us, we appreciate you over there as well. Make sure you stay subscribed to that feed for completely free. Well, Glen, it has absolutely been a whirlwind when you talk about the recruiting front as we are well into official visit season, 3 weekends down, another big weekend coming up here in Baton Rouge for the Tigers. Glenn, we could absolutely just run down a list of guys, but that would maybe we could probably fill 2 hours of radio if we did that, because there's so many names that LSU has been linked to, so many names that have come through LSU's campus over the past couple of days, and including, and we'll have coverage of it, the big Friday Night Lights camp upcoming this weekend as well. But Glenn, let's just start right here. We got a list of names. I've gotten some written down here that we'll take a look at, but just some of the names that are really kind of popping off the paper to you from what we're hearing, some of the intel from maybe, sources, from the players themselves and the families and the recruits.
Yeah, I think if you look at this weekend, you have to go further than the 5-star linebacker Jonah Williams, who was on campus for a couple days here. Really, really talented player, guy that LSU's going to be looking at for both football and for baseball. So they had a little bit of a dual, kind of team up there with Jay Johnson in the baseball program. So he spent a couple hours over there, and you wrote on it. It's part of your biscuits piece that you dropped on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Really, just a good team effort there in terms of the recruitment of Jonah Williams and where LSU sits. It's a little. It's a little hard to say just because he's such a highly touted player, and there's teams like Texas A&M that are going to be right there in the thick of it for the next several weeks or however long it takes for him to make his decision. So, that to me is the one that, man, if LSU could find a way to land him, that would be kind of your next, kind of all-star or, kind of all SEC caliber kind of talent that could
Mm-hmm.
kind of help solidify the middle of that defense for you. So really like the approach that LSU took with that one. We heard a lot of really good things about that visit, and you can certainly expand on that more because I know you spoke with him and spoke with a couple people about that visit. But, certainly you got to start off with that one. But, some of the more kind of interesting ones to me, guys that I was able to get a hold of and talk to a little bit. Carius Kearney, the offensive lineman, the 4-star interior lineman that is set to actually make a decision here in a couple days, fresh off of official visits here again with Arkansas and then LSU kind of going back-to-back weeks there. He's ready to kind of shut things down from what we understand. He was initially committed to Arkansas, backed off that commitment, ironically, after a visit to LSU earlier this spring. But he's now, ready to, I think, shut things down again. He'll be committing on Thursday, probably around noon. We'll look and kind of, be following that, announcement and when that's coming. But he's somebody that I think, you look at this offensive line and kind of what's already being built here with Devin Harper already on board, Brett Bordelon,
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Miller. All three of those guys are, it's a good nucleus for Brad Davis. So, you bring in a guy like Kearney, that would be obviously a really great kind of way to round out that nucleus on the offensive line. And then the other guy I was able to talk to here for a little bit, LeJesse Harold with the edge rusher out of, I believe where is he out of? Is he out of Florida? I believe he's out of Florida. He's a top 12 edge rusher out of Florida. Guy who's got a lot of programs that are after him right now. He was on UCF's campus, Illinois. I think he's got a decision here, not in the immediate future, but something that could be coming, months from now, months from now. He was telling me sooner or later is what his exact words to me were about a commitment. But he'll actually be at Texas A&M this weekend as well. But he raved about the job that Kevin Peoples has done, that Blake Baker did over the weekend with recruiting him. Really came away impressed with the program. This was, a guy that, hasn't been on campus a ton. I think this is really his first visit to LSU. So he, had a really good first visit. I think this was a good momentum builder for LSU to get into the teeth of that recruitment. So he'll be somebody to monitor for sure on the edge. You know, they obviously are very involved with Damian Shanklin, the 2025 edge rusher as well. So lots of moving pieces here for LSU, but those were just a couple that stood out to me. But what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of pick up with what you talked about with Jonah Williams. I mean, look, this is a guy that they brought in, current commit, and a guy they feel like can be a playmaker in Charles Ross to kind of help with that recruitment. Ross and Williams have worked out multiple times with each other over there in the state of Texas. And look, Williams is kind of a do-it-all guy. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. One of the craziest and coolest recruiting photos I've ever seen where they put him like in the action figure box, Glenn. That was a pretty cool like kind of recruiting piece for those guys to be able to take part in that photo shoot. But I like what you said. This is a double-edged sword, which what LSU is going in with this. Jay Johnson, we know how he can recruit on the diamond. He's a part of this. Brian Kelly is a part of this as well. And kind of the biggest message, from the Williams camp to me is, look, we are evaluating the best option, the best fit. And one of the biggest takeaways from this past weekend in Baton Rouge was the specific plan about how you can be a two-sport star. Look, it's doable at LSU. We've seen a long lineage of guys be able to be effective with that. And I actually shot a text over to a guy who's been on our podcast here recently, Jared Mitchell. He's a guy who was able to play both baseball and football for a time in Baton Rouge. And he said, look, it's doable. And that has to be a part of the plan when they go about wanting to recruit a guy like Williams who has a vested interest, a legitimate interest and legitimate potential in both sports. So I think that, while like you mentioned, Texas A&M and Oklahoma are going to be heavily involved here and they might consider themselves the favorites, I think LSU did a good job of putting its best foot forward with a clear path to this is how you can do what you want to do down here in Baton Rouge. And I think that's all you could ask for. Just a couple more names, as we kind of mentioned and talked with, Charles Ross. He said he's firmly committed. The staff's really excited about him. They felt like he was underrated when he committed as a 3-star. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, great athlete, sideline to sideline speeds there. And you even talked with some people who said, hey, and I included this in that Biscuits piece on Monday that we'll, obviously have linked below that you should check out. They feel like this is a guy who could come in. He's such a good player in terms of having a nose for the football and making plays. Maybe he gets thrown on special teams, a guy who fights for some position, or some playing time early on in the 2025 season. That being said, you kind of look at, the two cornerbacks. Look, cornerback is a weird position, I think, with LSU right now because they are involved in a lot of different highly touted names with where they could go with this thing. We know Jabari Antoine is kind of that coveted piece that they've already got. They feel like they have committed. He's taken a couple other visits as he's going to do and enjoy the process. But when you kind of look elsewhere, Glenn, at this, position, we just talked about, and I had a piece earlier, Jace Thomas has kind of officially entered the fold as a guy that say, hey, we want you to be a part of this roster. Now, he said he's taking his time. I've talked with Jace multiple times. I think it's going to be really, really hard for him to turn down the opportunity to play for LSU because that's been one he's been waiting on. And that 4.4 speed, man, I don't care what that does. That plays somewhere on the football field that he displayed there at that camp last weekend. But you kind of keep looking down the list. I'm going to say this name, and I'm sure that I will butcher it. Onis Konabani, however we're going to pronounce that, Onis Konabani. That's a guy who, I've talked with some people. North Carolina has been involved in this recruitment. A couple of other schools kind of, getting in. I think that the job done by Bobby Barham and this staff to really get him to campus for another time has drastically improved where they are. But I think that there's a sense of they don't really know, and not a lot of people really know where he's going to end up. I mean, he is definitely evaluating all of his options, a guy with good length on the outside that could be a weapon. But like I mentioned, kind of the good thing is that LSU has, and with Corey Raymond, a bunch of different options. Cade Phillips was on campus. I know Sonny talked with him prior to the visit, and I talked with him yesterday about Phillips, a Texas native. The Longhorns are going to be involved in this recruitment. LSU jumped in with an offer. Texas jumped in with an offer. So, when you look at that defense, Glenn, this is something I've had conversations about with people and even dating back, we'll go back a month when we had Cooper Patagna, national recruiting analyst on the show, is yes, the offensive stars are in this 2025 class, but they could use a Jonah Williams. They could use one of these corners to pop. One of the big defensive linemen. Guys like that. We know that 2026 class is loaded with what they have, but they could really use some star power on the other side of the football. It's kind of becoming a thing where, and wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
We know LSU can recruit offense. Defensively, we need to start seeing some of these things change, which, I've heard great things about the way that Bo Davis has laid out a plan for these guys. He's kept it very businesslike with a lot of them, but just kind of your thoughts on, hey, offensive recruiting trending well. I know fans are getting anxious this time of the year. They'd like to see a couple dominoes fall on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, I don't think that's to be unexpected at this time. I mean, this is a new defensive staff. Like, they've been on campus together for about 5 months here. They have a great track record, or at least a lot of them have great track records of recruiting at a high level. And, I think they'll get the pieces that they need. Look, I think LSU, you mentioned the cornerback spot. I think they sit in a very good position for DJ Pickett. I know he's right in the middle of his official visits right now. But just from everything we heard about that visit, LSU really blew that thing away, and I think they sit in a really good spot for him. Look, the defensive recruiting, I think you're going to have to really recruit here to the point of, this is what we need to be, this is what we have been, and this is how you can make us what we were again. Like, this is how we can build this thing back up. And I think there are a lot of players that are out there in this class that see that opportunity, at least from the ones that we've had a chance to talk to kind of really build this defense back up, because they have not been in the spot that we really believe or really think LSU defenses should be. And so that's going to be very important for LSU's defensive staff to make that mark on all those players. And certainly you've seen it with guys like with Shanklin. He certainly seems to understand that. Pickett seems to understand that. We'll see kind of what happens here with Jonah Williams, but man, those three right there would be such a great start to kind of building this thing back up. Obviously a lot easier said than done to pull off all those moves, but you like where LSU at least stands at this time for all of those players. And you look at the defensive tackle room. I mean, Zion Williams is supposed to be making a decision here on July 4th. He's somebody that is seriously considering LSU. Brandon Brown is currently a Texas commit. He was on campus again within the last couple of weeks. He's somebody that I think LSU would really love to make that flip and see if Bo Davis magic can't work there a little bit. So there's a lot of options out there. Certainly with half in front of Corey Raymond. I think they listed him at 6'1", so he maybe has grown an inch or two since the last time we've seen him, or since the last time maybe even you spoke with him. But there's just a lot of I think there's a lot of options that LSU has at their disposal right now. It's just about kind of trying to find a way to capitalize on some of them. And until the defensive staff does, it's kind of hard to know exactly whether this is going to be a success or a failure or whatever you want to call it, because I think there's just so many dominoes that are still up in the air right now in terms of this recruiting class and where it could ultimately fall.
Yeah, look, and Sonny's mentioned this to me, and that Bayou Splash event at the end of July is a massive event in terms of getting guys that are committed and kind of that last hurrah before a lot of these kids, maybe slow down on their visits because their high school seasons are starting. So, that's a big time event for these guys to really kind of, look at, I imagine, and talking with some people, like I know for a fact, we mentioned, there with a couple of guys, Cade Phillips is going to try to be back for that event. CJ Wiley is another guy that, we haven't mentioned yet on the offensive side of the football, but, I kind of put my thoughts there with CJ Wiley, and we can talk about this for a second. Wide receiver is another one of those positions. Cortez Hankton is going to have his options that he can roll with. I still like where they sit with Khalid Lockett. I know that Texas is going to be a major player there. I feel like Lockett has, seen the best that LSU has to offer. But with CJ Wiley, look, there's obviously the connection with his father being an LSU, great, and they had a cool picture where they had a picture of his dad in the little background, and CJ got to take a picture with that. I just think Georgia's going to be hard to beat. Right in his backyard, Milton High School. His high school is very, very close to Athens in terms of a quick drive over there. And it's not like Georgia's not one of the top programs in the country right now. So, I mean, that's kind of a whole nother deal there that you look at. But, Glenn, talk a little bit about the wide receiver position because we know C.J. Wiley's there. We know that Derek Meadows is scheduled to take a visit. So, Glenn, when we kind of look at the wide receiver position, I mean, look, Cortez Hankton's going to have his pick. I mean, everyone knows the lineage of LSU wide receivers. Most notably, everyone saw that catch that Malik Neighbors made during OTAs. That was filthy. I mean, you get to kind of see what these guys can bring to the table. C.J. Wiley, though, I mean, look, the connection is there with his dad. Obviously, he got to take some pictures. There was a picture of his dad that he got to take a picture with that the staff pulled out. That was really cool to see. But just overall, I mean, like, I used to live in the state of Georgia. I know what it means for kids to get that offer, from that school, that's so close. And also, and the fact, too, it's one of the powerhouses in our sport right now. So it's going to be hard to beat and bring him all the way to Baton Rouge. Talk a little bit about C.J. Wiley, but a couple of these other options, Derek Meadows, Khalil Lockett. I mean, there's not a lack of options, even though DeCorian Moore, took a visit, looked excited, went to Texas next weekend. We don't know what that's going to hold too, but there's a lot of options for Hankton. It's a position I'm not necessarily concerned with.
I don't think you ever have to be concerned about the position of wide receiver at LSU. I mean, they always are going to find, those diamonds in the rough. They're going to find those players no matter what. I mean, Malik Neighbors was a borderline 4-star guy on 24/7 coming out of high school. And, how much does that kind of look silly now in retrospect? It's you're going to have some hits and some misses, but LSU is really, I think, they've done a good job of recruiting this position this cycle. I think they're in on a number of these players. You mentioned Meadows. That visit's supposed to be coming here in the next couple days, his official visit. So, he's a Las Vegas kid. There's not really a whole ton of, I would imagine, a whole ton of home ties to Las Vegas in terms of schools that are around that area. So, he's probably somebody that's looking to go out of state, maybe the SEC. Maybe that's something you pitch him to. And I think the fact that they're getting him on campus for, I believe, the second time in as many months. I think he was out here for the spring game, or he was around here for spring at some point. So that's an encouraging sign. So that could certainly work in LSU's favor. But look, I don't have much to add there on terms of what you said about Wiley. I think, it's, if anything, it's, looking at it from that perspective of what it means for a Georgia player to get, that offer from the Bulldogs. I think it's very similar to how a lot of Louisiana kids feel in terms of getting that LSU offer. So certainly understandable there. I think LSU, all you can do is make your best pitch and see kind of what goes. But a guy that we didn't even really mention in this whole ordeal was Jamie French. And I think he is probably the guy that, if you look at this and kind of read between the tea leaves, okay, so what happens if DeCorian Moore and Khalil Lockett both go to Texas, or if one of those two goes to Texas? Texas has been viewed as a hot landing spot for a guy like French for a while now, since he decommitted from Alabama. Maybe that opens the door for LSU to get in there and make their pitch and get him as a part of this class. He obviously has a very strong relationship with Bryce Underwood. He was on campus here recently and a couple weeks ago, and really the first tweet that Underwood sent after that weekend visit was a caption of French on his visit and talking about coming to LSU to play with him. So. I think those two have a really nice relationship. Obviously, the one with the coaching staff is going to be probably most important to getting it done. But I think you look at French, you look at Meadows, you look at some of these young Louisiana wide receivers that are maybe kind of on the come up here. There's going to be some options for LSU to maybe go after some guys that maybe aren't on the radar right now, but could play themselves into kind of some offers, or play themselves into some opportunity to play for a school like LSU. So certainly a lot of guys kind of sift through. Nashawn Montgomery was another one that was on campus here recently. So there's a lot kind of a lot of footballs in the air right now for LSU to kind of sift through, and I'll be very interested because I do think that they wind up with one or two of these guys. I just don't know that it's very clear right now which one or two they ultimately get.
Yeah, and that's going to be kind of the big piece to the puzzle here, is which one. And you mentioned the Texas factor as being a huge one. Like, I don't think that Texas is going to be able to take 3 to 4 to 5 star receivers. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if there's going to be enough room in the class, and maybe not enough room in the NIL war chest. Now, someone might clip this, a Longhorns fan might clip that and say these dumb LSU writers, well, they don't know what they're talking about. But that's just kind of how I see it, and I do agree with your point there as well. But LSU's firmly in the mix, and like you said, regardless of how this plays out, I feel good about where things stand. A guy that I think that the staff knows they could have in their back pocket is, again, out of Destrehan. Philip Wright is a burner. It's a guy that they're going. I've got a feeling that he's probably 5th or 6th on the board. Let's just play the hypothetical. If 1, 2, 3, and 4 kind of start to fall, those dominoes fall elsewhere, they're going to turn up the heat on Philip Wright and see if they can get him to commit. But that's a young man. That Destrehan team's loaded, by the way. I was telling someone the day, I got to get down there and see those guys, because that's a really good team with a lot of talent. But, Glenn, as we kind of wrap it up here, we have another OV weekend coming up. And just taking a look at some of the names, that are on that OV list. Fahim Delane is one of those. Have to check and see if that OV is still happening. Obviously, he's committed to Ohio State, he announced. But a name that, I have been kind of paying attention to, was able to talk with him earlier in the spring. You look at the size up front, 6'3", 295 pounds, 290 pounds now he's up to. Walter Mathis, the 3-star defensive lineman out of Savannah, Georgia. That's one that they're going to keep an eye on. And then a guy who is, he likes all the tweets. He shares all the posts about LSU, and I feel like he's kind of gotten thrown under the radar a little bit because we've talked so much about Damian Shanklin, but it's Xavier Okapono. That's a guy that has been really kind of just flying under the radar, the 3-star. He's 6'3", 300, though. We've talked a lot about Shanklin. Okapono played a little bit of outside. He's put on weight, could play inside with that 3 technique. So we'll see. It's going to be fun, though. And this Friday, you want to make sure that you're subscribed to the Go 24/7 website, because we're going to have great coverage of a Friday Night Lights. They're going to take them inside Tiger Stadium and let those guys air it out. And Glenn, I remember you were in Omaha last year, and it was my first ever, time inside Tiger Stadium to be for that event. And I'm sitting there watching Bryce Underwood throw balls to Harlem Berry and, watching a couple of these guys. And that was quite a group they had out there last year. So as we kind of get that list of guys that are going to be there this Friday, that's something to keep an eye on too.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Everything we've heard for the last several weeks is that this is going to be the big one. Like, this is going to be the one where they want to get a bunch of guys in. They want to get as many of their commits and, kind of future prospects that they're recruiting in here. So we'll have it all updated in terms of just who's on board, who's coming in town. But this is going to be a big day, I think, for LSU in terms of where they can go with this 2025 class. And you mentioned just a couple of the names there. I think Okpono is probably the one that really stands out to me as a guy that just kind of screams LSU if they're able to get in there with Bo Davis. Him and Brandon Brown and Zion Williams are kind of the 3 interior D linemen that I think would just be really a good start for Bo Davis to kind of help replenish some of the young bodies that maybe they've lost in that room over the years. So there's a lot to dive into as the week goes on. We'll be on top of all of it, but I would just say stay tuned, because this is going to be a good final kind of end of June for the LSU football recruiting world.
It will be. It's hard to believe that we're nearing the end of June, almost the July 4th holiday. And like we've kind of teased here, off the air, Glenn, next thing you know, SEC Media Days, fall camp, and then we're right back into the action with the college football season. It's no better time for you to join us over at Go 24/7. Great conversation with myself, Glen West, and Sonny Ship, giving you all the information you could want on your LSU Tigers. Well, we appreciate you watching. Appreciate you tuning in. If you're listening in the podcast or if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Give us a follow on social media as well. And we will catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.